Guys, I'm currently in Abbots Bromley, and that pub right there, the Coach and Horses, is where... What happened there? It was the start of a murder investigation, or a murder scene, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, everyone started to look at me through the windows, so let's get into it. On the 22nd of May 1857, William Charlesworth, a farmer from Blake End, had been drinking at the Coach and Horses in Abbots Bromley, a place he was known to visit while collecting his rents, and like many other nights in the village, it began as nothing more than a piss-up with his mates. Among those present that night were two young men, George Jackson and Charles Brown, both in their early 20s, and at some point as the evening wore on and the drink took a hold, a suggestion was made, not to kill, not even necessarily to harm, but to frighten Charlesworth as he made his way home, and if he happened to be carrying any money, to take it. It was said plainly, frighten him a bit, and if he's got any money, we'll take it. A man named locally as Dudley Jack overheard this and warned them against doing the old man any harm before returning to the pub, leaving Jackson and Brown to go through with what they'd already begun. Sometime after 1:30 in the morning, Charlesworth left the Coach and Horses, and not long after he was followed. What happened next comes from the confessions given and from the evidence found on that road. Jackson and Brown caught up with Charlesworth about a mile from Bromley, and as they approached from behind, Charlesworth realised what was happening. He turned to them and said, "I know you're here after me. You mean to rob me." And in that moment, whatever intention there had been to simply frighten him gave way to violence. Jackson picked up a large hedge stake and said, "Now is the time," before striking Charlesworth on the side of the head. He fell and Jackson struck him again, kicking him in the head while he was down. What an absolute shithouse. The injuries were severe, the skull crushed on the left side of the forehead and beneath the ear, with deep abrasions across the face, and two large pools of blood marking where he'd fallen. They turned out his pockets and they left him there. By around 5 o'clock that morning, his body was lying on the roadside, but so disfigured was his face that he was not immediately recognised, even by those who had known him his whole life. Nearby, a hedge stake stained with blood was recovered, and footprints near the hedge matched Jackson's boots, while further searches uncovered 2 purses hidden beneath a haystack near his home, containing between £8 and £9, some of which he admitted had belonged to Charlesworth. Both men were arrested and both made confessions acknowledging their part in what had happened. At trial, they were described as young men with no history of serious crime. Jackson in particular said to be weak-minded and overcome with remorse, while Brown, who had served in the militia, appeared far more composed, showing little outward reaction until the sentence was passed. Both were found guilty and both were sentenced to death. At Stafford, on the morning of the execution, thousands gathered outside the jail, with estimates placing the crowd at between 4,000 and 5,000 people, drawn to witness what was, at the time, still a public act. In the hours leading up to it, Jackson's condition had worsened significantly, weakened by both physical distress and the weight of what was coming, and when he was brought forward to the scaffold, he was unable to maintain composure. As preparations were made, he became increasingly agitated, crying out and struggling against those around him, and at one point pulling the Hessian cap from his own head, forcing the officers present to restrain him by tying his feet. He begged for mercy in between his own groans and sobbing, repeatedly calling out as he fought against what was happening. Even as the noose was placed, he continued to struggle, his distress growing more frantic in those final moments, until the drop was finally released. Those who seen it did not speak lightly of it. The scene was described as unusually painful, with several officers of the jail stating that they'd never before witnessed anything so distressing and revolting, and it was said, even at the time, that it was hoped that such a pitiful sight would not be again reenacted in the county for a long time. And then after hanging for the allotted time, his body was cut down and buried within the precincts of the jail. So rest in peace, William Charlesworth.